I think the hardest part for most people that are beginners in both, right, which is where I was, is you're learning one skill set, gardening, which is, it's pretty intimidating sometimes to learn how to garden. It depends on the way you approach it, but it can be intimidating.
Absolutely.
And then you need to learn how to cook. But most of the time, people who just cook are cooking from grocery stores.
Yes.
So they're cooking vegetables and fruits and et cetera that have already been prepared down to their like saleable point. So like an onion that doesn't have the roots and doesn't have the top and is already cured, right? Or like, I don't know, like a pepper that's in a bag and a garlic that's already been cloved out. Jacques, we're in the backyard garden today for our monthly episode together here on the Beet podcast. But for those of you watching, which you can watch on the YouTube channel or listening, we're going to do a little different this time. For 7 years now, it has been a near daily podcast. But since Jacques and I are vibing it out, cranking it out a little bit more often here, we're going to try one long episode this week and see what you guys think. So let us know in the comments or shoot us a DM on Instagram. We are trying to make this podcast a little bit more engaging, a little more fun. But we kind of just got back from a trip, Jacques. I wouldn't say of a lifetime, but it was pretty epic trip.
It was extremely epic. It's the first time I've been to Illinois and Chicagoland area ever.
Yeah.
But we went up and we visited the Aquascape headquarters, and it was actually super amazing. I went in with like no real expectations, and now I've left wanting a pond or water feature for myself because it was just so much fun to see and interact with.
Yeah, Jacques has been, I wouldn't say poo-pooing the idea of a pond, but you've seen my pond. Obviously, I think you like the pond. But a pond at your own house has been like maybe a little daunting.
Yeah.
And you couldn't quite get the, as Greg Witzok, who's the founder of Aquascapes, calls it, the Aquascapes lifestyle. And the second you got to Chicago, you were like, oh, I get it.
Yeah, I told Greg, I was like, look, I get the Aquascape lifestyle now because I'm walking in through these yards. And because the thing is, it's like when we put the pond in here, we really waited for a while before really landscaping.
Yes.
And I think that was really what kind of maybe stalled me out a little bit. Because when you went, some of these ponds we saw were there for 10, 20 years. Some were only there for 5. But the ones that were there for a long time, that were fully planted and established, were truly like a set piece of the entire house and yard. Like it was the main attraction. It was beautiful, relaxing, inviting.
Yeah.
I loved it.
We started out the trip at this really cool hotel.
Oh yeah, that was really nice.
And they gave you little cookies. I guess the hotel used to be a dairy, and then below the hotel, like in the basement floor, is where they used to store all the milk. And so that was the whole tie. That's why they gave you a cookie, and then you could actually ring, one on the phone, and they'd bring up a little thing of milk.
He went in deep.
And I went in, as I can see,
I mean,
I'm leaned
you know
out.
A lot of detail. No, I'm saying because you know everything about it.
Well, I know a lot
about
about
the history,
Yeah.
which number to call.
I ate 3 in the first night. I'll be honest. I ate 3 in the first night.
I had to.
But regardless, we were joined by Laura from Garden Answer and Aaron.
It was a lot of fun.
Which was super fun. It's the first time we've ever met them in person. We've chatted a lot and we've obviously interacted over the years, but to have epic Meet Garden Answer at such a cool event, I thought was really fun. So we started the next day by kind of wandering around Chicagoland. We went to 6 different ponds, and every single one, like you said, was different, but also had its own level of sort of style and vibe.
Yeah, its own like wow factor.
Mm-hmm.
Like the first one was Brian's. He's one of the main people at Aquascape who does a lot of pond installs. That one was really like peaceful, beautiful, with like pagoda, waterfalls, like an area you could go like dip your feet in.
Mm-hmm.
But then we went to that hazy one.
At the end of the day?
It was like, well, that one too, but there's a lot of crazy ones. But one of them had like a full stream running. It would be like running from Kevin's pond basically to the shed. And then at the end, there was a 7-foot deep pool with like 30, 50 koi, and you could swim in it.
Yeah.
Like I didn't even think about that aspect of a pond that you could actually swim in.
And this was like a backyard in Chicago. I mean, it's a pretty nice house, I have to say.
It was definitely nice.
All these houses, at the ponds that we saw, I think were a bit on
they're extra
they're
outside
side.
of my price range.
Yeah, they're outside of my price range too, I'll tell you that much. Unless Greg wants to be kind and throw me a bone or something.
Yeah.
But no, the one you're talking about is like a 100-foot stream, all natural, right? Like all the Aquascape style pond, like the rock going into the borders.
That's the thing I really like.
But the thing I think that you touched on that's so true that we did neglect for a while, and to some degree we are still neglecting, is the level of landscaping around a natural pond is what makes it look even more natural.
Absolutely.
So every single one of these ponds had some type of height around it. Some type of small tree, large tree, a
Somewhere
creeping,
like whimsical.
yeah. Like you really got into that one pine that was kind of creeping over.
Absolutely.
That looked really neat.
It was like creeping out like 6 feet from the trunk, like horizontally.
Over.
And there was like the twisty ones.
Yeah.
And like a maple, and they just look really nice.
Yeah.
They just like look really cool.
Now the caveat, I guess I'll say, is that if you're in Chicago in the summer, the type of landscaping you can access relative to San Diego is a little bit different. Not to say don't feel bad for us.
Yeah.
But I can't have, 17 hydrangeas around the pond, right? I got to have something different. But yeah, we saw a lot. I mean, I think we all had a lot of fun. The end, though, let's talk about this garden, Peggy's garden.
Man. That was like a magazine garden.
I've never seen anything better in my life.
No, it's like almost a disservice to call it a garden. It was like a botanical garden in a sense, because it was, I don't know how big it was, maybe an acre.
4 acres.
4 acres. And it had multiple water elements. Like it had a giant sort of cascading waterfall into a nice little pond. Then it had another waterfall that was full of frogs across like a little valley.
Yeah.
Those all planted with ferns, huge oak trees, all sorts of hostas and neat flowers. Just a lot going on. And it just felt like a really inviting place to go on like relaxing walk.
Yeah. I mean,
Another level for sure.
I talked to Peggy, who's the owner, with her husband, and she mentioned that ravine. So there's the house, there's a sort of cascading pond, and then there's a ravine, and then like you said, there's another sort of waterfall. So she said the ravine was natural to the property. She didn't like create that. She decided to landscape around and down it, but the ponds accelerated that because you could have both ponds on both sides of the ravines kind of spilling in, but the water doesn't actually return into the ravine itself.
Right.
Because of the way an Aquascapes pond works, right? Like it'll fall into, much like mine, an underground reservoir and look as if it's trickling into the ravine. So she really manufactured, in a way, something that would happen in nature, but just not exactly where she lives.
Yeah, and I'm sure that ravine actually does flood when it rains and pull water through, and that looks even cooler.
Yeah.
Because you have like 2 waterfalls coming down into a stream.
Yeah.
So like seeing all those was definitely inspiring and made me want a water feature, but then I looked at it and I'm like, okay, well, I know I can't do that.
No.
Because that's at a different price range for me. But now I'm like very interested in doing maybe a like little babbling brook through a native garden that doesn't have that many gallons, it's a little more simple, or like a little water feature for birds that can I can invite them into the garden, give them some water, or for the bees, just like little things like that. The sound of water, being able to see it, the motion.
Yeah.
I want an element of it. I don't know if I'm ready for a full pond, but all those pieces, I definitely am interested in.
I'm ready for a full pond for you, because you do have that spot in your yard that kind of is a pond basin.
There's 2.
Yeah. He has 2 old pond basins that he just doesn't want to accept should just be ponds.
I can't accept.
He has this like way overgrown orange blanket flower. I'm talking way overgrown, and not just like charmingly overgrown.
I think it's charming.
And yeah, you're the only one though.
I know, but
because even your partner doesn't think it is.
The comments upset me.
Really?
Like, yeah, the comments support me. They say, yeah, that's beautiful. What is it?
Yeah, but here's the thing.
I haven't seen the whole thing again.
It could be beautiful with water in the pond.
Yeah.
But anyways, so we did this epic pond tour, but then to me what really blew me away, especially as a business owner, was going over to Aquascapes headquarters. This is a business Greg's owned and run for 35 years, I think.
Yeah, amazing.
And he has probably the most epic headquarters I've ever seen of a company.
Absolutely.
He has a 600,000 gallon pond in the front yard. He has another pond in the back, which you can actually sit in these lawn chairs and put your feet in.
Right.
Your butt's not in the water, but your feet are. And
I think they said they get like
1,000 gourmet koi, like luxury koi, are swarming around your feet, just kind of bumping around. So Laura and I sat in that pond, just kind of vibing and relaxing and having a little taster of wine or something like that. I had a deep dish pizza.
Yeah, deep dish.
We had a deep dish pizza.
Very good.
Yeah, it was just really cool to see, inspiring to me, I think, as a owner of a business.
Well, yeah,
because
sure. He also had that whole facility for his employees to enjoy. They had like a basketball court, tennis court, volleyball court, like batting cages, all sorts of fun stuff.
Those who sweat together stay together, is what he says. If you ever spent a hot day on the garden and then gotten dehydrated at the end of the day, congratulations, you're me. I do that all of the time until the last couple months or so when I started using electrolytes, which brings us to the sponsor of today's episode, Element. Element is a zero sugar electrolyte drink mix, perfect for gardeners and anyone who enjoys the outdoors. And if you don't like mixing it in, they also have sparkling waters. So I've been using Element for a couple months now. My favorite flavor is their raspberry salt, but they've got at least 7 or 8 delicious flavors, and they provide a meaningful dose of electrolytes free of sugar, artificial colorings and any other dodgy ingredients, and they're used by a ton of different types of people. Gardeners for sure. Like I said, I've been using them for a couple months now. And Navy SEALs and athletes and anyone who wants to make their hydration a priority. And because you're listening to The Beet, you can get a free sample pack of Element through the link in the episode description. If you don't like it, just return it, no questions asked. My big takeaway, I guess, was the power of a pure landscape versus a garden.
Yeah.
It's different. Some of the landscape or the ornamental stuff that we've done this year, for you, what's been hitting?
For me, I've been focusing on cleaning up my yard so I could add in more of those beautiful elements.
Yeah.
So in terms of like proper true landscaping, I haven't really gone that deep into it. I have added what I would consider landscaping, which is like that new native garden on the side of my bedroom, which I have surrounded with like a little rock wall. I mulched it, planted it out. But the next element is to add in that little water feature. But you've been adding a lot more beauty and really big flowers, like you mentioned with the amaranth. And in general, I think you've actually outdone me on flowers this year.
Yeah, I have to outdo you on something because you got me on. We always compare every season. Yeah. So you got me this year on tomatoes. Absolutely. I have a lot of them, but I don't have the size and quality, I don't think, that you do. I think I got you on peppers.
Yeah.
And I think I got you.
You got me for sure.
I got you at least right now.
Yeah, you definitely did.
I've got you on melons.
Yep.
And I might have you on flowers.
And you definitely outsquashed me.
Yeah, but that one I don't want to win. That one I didn't want to win. I'd rather you have beaten me on that one. But what else worked well for you?
What's worked really well for me this year was I went into this gardening season, for some reason, like not wanting to mulch. I don't know why.
Okay, yeah.
I was just like, I'm going to go compost on top, let that heat up the soil, get everything ripping. And I left it for too long. And I started to see that my plants were a little bit suffering. Like the pepper leaves look a little bit sad. I was like, I don't know what's happening. I'm watering enough. And then sure enough, added some compost, added a nice layer of straw mulch on top. And ever since then, everything has done really well.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's like, I feel like I'm neglecting. I want to push back on some of that, like
the wisdom.
Classic wisdom. Like, oh, maybe I don't need that much mulch. But then once I added it, I haven't changed my watering schedule and everything has done much, much better.
It's
one of those classic things, right?
It's a classic rebel and then conform.
Yeah.
We just walked around sometimes we'll walk around the garden, Jacques and I, even your garden sometimes, and we planted a new succession of the indeterminate tomatoes in my yard because I think if you remember, I started them too early in the spring, just a touch too early, a couple weeks too early. So they were a little too long when they went in the ground. So I had to bury them deep. Otherwise they would have been really flimsy. Yep. So they stalled because we learned from that tomato transplant experiment, if you bury deep, you'll still get decent tomatoes, but it will stall the top growth for a while. So I think what happened is they became slightly more susceptible to like mildews and bacterials. So they got taken over a little quicker than I would have liked.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because I pruned them to single leader and I spaced them 2 feet apart. So
definitely had airflow.
Airflow shouldn't have been a problem. We even did a little bit of a light organic spray and they still got hit. And so what happened now is we just pretty much replanted every single one. There's 7, only 1 have we kept going from the original batch. And we were walking around yesterday and we were like, yeah, they're suffering. They're not doing that well. It's a hot month right now.
Yeah.
It's humid.
Stressful.
And we both sort of agreed we haven't mulched it in a while. So I actually am thinking just mounding like a little pyramid of compost up around each one.
Okay.
Because I might even get some extra roots in that. Who knows?
Yeah.
But I think you're right. Like it's just giving the water that the plant is already receiving more ability to retain itself by adding the mulch. You don't have to water more. You don't have to fertilize more. It just needs to accept that water.
Especially since here in San Diego, we have to use drip irrigation, right? So it's just one drop of water. If there's nothing around it to retain that, it's just going to go straight down.
It'll go straight down.
But the mulch allows it to kind of evaporate and spread.
And
so it's really made a big difference.
It does depend, I guess, on the type of mulch you have. Because if you've got, like, let's say for some reason you have a peaty style mulch. It's not common, but let's just imagine. If it's bone dry, you're totally right. Like a couple of drips here and there, it'll take quite a while for it to rehydrate because it's semi-hydrophobic when it's
even
bone
compost.
Dry. Yeah, exactly. And it just takes a while to get that hydrated. Yeah. So sometimes I think if you notice that your plants are, even if they're on drip, if you notice that they're a little bit suffering, you might want to come through with a can and just give it just hydrate the whole soil first.
I think that's like another important thing is drip irrigation helps. It's not perfect because of course it's only going to have water where the emitter is. And I like to do this every once in a while. So I'll go through my garden and just hand water the surface of everything.
Yeah.
Just to give it like a nice, even water distribution.
Yeah.
And that makes a big difference. But the other thing you mentioned earlier was the tomato succession. And that's something that I actually did this year on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I planted my first tomatoes like in March.
Early
Yeah.
for us.
Yeah. And then I started a new round. I planted those in, I want to say like late May or June. And then even more recently at the end of July, I planted a third round of tomatoes. And now my original round is starting to look a little bit sad. That's fine, because now that second one is starting to fruit and develop. The third one is on its way. And that way I could start cycling and still have tomatoes throughout this entire period of our growing season.
To me, I feel like you've nailed tomatoes better than anyone I know in San Diego, for sure. In general, what you've done well, and I think something to take home for those listening is, unless you're in a really low zone, and I wouldn't say even then, but maybe even then, you really should think of tomatoes as a double season crop. You should plant them twice a season, absolutely. If you're in 6+, zone 6+, I think you should plant them twice a season.
Yeah.
You should have your earlies and you should have your mids and maybe even a late. You can do that two ways. We've talked about this before. You can do it with days to maturity, so you can start all varieties on the same day.
Right.
Let's say you did Glacier, and then that's a 55-day, and then let's say you get something that's like a 100-day. Well, there's another, 5 weeks of buffer, and in a tight zone, that might be all you need, because you get the Glaciers out within, start them indoors, right? So you get those out in a month and a half into the season, maybe, you start seeing some fruit.
Yeah.
And then 2 months and 3 weeks later, the next ones are setting in while that glacier's hopefully dying off. So
totally.
Two ways to think about. You do it, obviously, a full reset succession of new varieties.
Resets. Yeah. Sometimes it also gives me a chance to try more different varieties.
Yeah.
Or like the first round, if I really liked one of them, I'll start a little bit more of that so I could have it later in the season. But if you're in a warm zone, I'd say even 9+, you could still get away with cherry tomatoes.
Well into October.
Until they just die.
Until they die.
Like in San Diego, I have them year round.
Yeah. A technique I've been doing for 2 years now is the on-purpose bumper crop, basically. I have my indeterminate area that's on a specific sort of trellis style structure. That might change from year to year, but usually I have some indeterminates I'm trellising somehow. Yeah. I have a specific patch of determinates. This year it was my sauce row. So it's a whole row of San Marzanos, also staked on bamboo, so not as serious of a structure.
Yeah, you're limiting how much they'll produce.
Yeah, I'm not going to max them out, but I have 18 of them, so I don't need everyone to be genetically maxed. But the thing that I have done for 2 years now is I will throw in a raised bed, usually in the front yard, in a bigger bed. Yeah. I'll throw in a back line or just one bed. I'll actually go to the nursery sometimes and just grab whatever determinate bushing are there, and this will be mid-season. And then I'll just plant a ton of them. I don't care too much about spacing. I don't trellis them at all. And I actually plant them sort of near the edges of the bed, and they fall over the edge, which weirdly prevents them from like rotting out by kind of collapsing
they're not
into
on the
another.
ground.
Yeah, so they're just hanging, right? And I'll pick dozens of those. Yeah. And then those just become sauce tomatoes for the most part, because I could use them they're like sandwich slicers, but I don't have to use them that way. Just turn them into sauce.
No, I think a lot of people, I had a comment, I made like the sauce video, and they're like, oh, everything looks good, but you used the wrong tomato. You should have used a sauce tomato. I'm like, there is no wrong tomato.
No.
Like, the only thing that's different between something that's a paste or sauce tomato and anything else is that it just has less like moisture initially. It is a less wet tomato. It's not going to cut open and spill juice out like a big slicer would. Mm. And so the difference is that either you have a more watery sauce or you cook it a little bit longer.
You cook it down.
And it just gets thicker. And you have different flavors. It's more interesting in my experience.
I agree.
Mix. I like it more.
No, that's not true. I've done a pure sauce with sauce tomatoes like San Marzanos a few times.
Yeah.
But most of the time by the end of the season, I'm making,
whatever you have.
The chef's choice, whatever, throw them in the mix.
Totally.
And you're right. Like, it's just a more watery tomato. But what I like to do, at least, I make like a sauce that you simmer for ages. Yeah. And I reduce that sauce, and I like it a little thicker. Like, I don't want if I'm making homemade pasta, right, and I'm putting sauce on, like I say, I take a spoonful of the sauce and I put it on top. I want it to kind of stay where it was for a little bit. I see. That's the level of chunk.
You don't want it to just run off.
I don't want it to fall. Yeah. Right. And so I reduce my sauces a lot, and I put in like butter. I quarter onions and I put those in. I put basil. I put herbs, and I don't even pick them off the stem. I fish them out after type thing.
I see. I do that with time.
I try to make like a savory, herbed up sauce instead of like a more classical pure sauce. But I don't know. This year kind of brings me to like, there's a lot to harvest.
Yes.
And there's a lot coming down the pipe, I'm a little afraid.
I'm a little afraid of my hot pepper situation.
Do you have that many?
I told myself that I wouldn't be in that situation.
Yeah.
And here I am.
There you are.
I have too many hot peppers and I don't know what to do with them all. So
I have definitely the most corn I've had in my life.
You have, I don't even want to hazard a guess right now.
Well, let's do the math. So there's an 8x4 bed in the front planted with corn, and there are 3 4x4 plots in the test garden planted with corn. So that's 12 square feet plus, or sorry, that's not 12 square feet. That is 48 square feet in the backyard plus another 32. So just under like about 80 or so.
I'd say you have well over 100 plants.
Yeah, I have over 100 for sure, which means at 2 to 3 per, I've got a couple hundred ears of corn. And here's the thing, not a lot of earworm this year.
No.
Not a lot of corn earworm.
I've noticed that too.
So that means that not only do I have a lot of ears of corn, I have more pristine ears, right? So I don't have to...
Which was your goal.
That was my goal. And I succeeded too much, right? And so the question is like, what am I going to do, right? What am I going to do? So I don't know. I've got a couple ideas. I'm curious what you think.
Well, for tomatoes, what I've been doing, because I've had that bumper crop, I'm like, I just can't deal with it right now. I can't make sauce. I don't have the energy or the time. And so I have a chest freezer. It's just now entirely full of tomatoes. So the other day, somebody went and they're like, do you know your freezer is full of tomatoes? I was like, yeah, it better be.
Yeah.
That's where I've been putting them. And so I have like multiple grocery bags full of homegrown tomatoes in the freezer. And my plan is to make sauce at some point. But that's one of the nice things about something like a tomato is that you could throw that whole thing, don't do anything to it, right in the freezer.
Don't even clean it.
Don't even need to clean it. When you pull it out, the skin will just fall off once it gets a little bit warm. You could throw it in a bowl of water and the skin will just melt away.
Auto blanch.
Yeah, exactly. You don't even have to blanch.
Yeah.
So I actually find it better. And that's my plan for now at least. But I do actually want to try canning them because I can't leave them in the freezer forever.
Like proper canned whole tomatoes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to try doing it so that I'm not like making a sauce.
Yeah.
But I'm storing an ingredient. So I want to store the tomatoes. So instead of being like an Italian classic tomato sauce for pasta, I just have a tomato I could pull to put it in that soup or this dish, or maybe I will make pasta sauce, but I don't have to like be forced into it.
You don't have to choose. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I think
you have the pressure canner. We did a zesty salsa last year. That worked really well.
It actually was good.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Yeah. So I'm thinking maybe either borrow your pressure canner or maybe get one myself because I got a lot of tomatoes to deal with.
I have, I don't have the chest freezer yet. I'm very close to buying one though.
Yeah.
Very close. But
tempting.
I've got 2 freezer bags stuffed to the brim with big tomatoes.
Oh, okay.
And then I've got a whole platter of San Marzanos underneath the awning right now.
Yeah.
And then I've got all those determinate on purpose bumper crop sitting also in a RBI harvest basket out there. So I've got a lot of tomatoes to deal with. So that I think I'm going with a classic sauce for at least one preparation. Yeah. And then on the corn, I'm going to start actually just grabbing an ear a day and either doing 1 or 2 ears a day. Because you can eat, this is all sweet corn, right? So it's honey gold, butter and gold, true gold, I think are some of the varieties. All classic, you know. Either white and yellow kernels or pure yellow kernels. I love the one that I think it's butter gold. We sell at Botanical Interest. Yeah. That has the pat of butter, has the art like on the actual cob, which to me is like, that's how you eat it.
That's what you want.
That's what you want.
I have done corn, but when I did corn to save, it was the kind that you could dry.
Yeah.
And that's obviously much easier.
That was your flint corn, right?
Yeah. It's just, it was the
Martian
Jewels, which is like a multi-purpose, but whatever. You could just leave it on the plant, let it go full dry. I have one patch in my front yard with Oaxacan green corn, which is for tortillas. So I am going to let that sit on the plant, fully dry down. But for sweet corn, I am curious to see what you want to do because one thing is you could blanch them all, cut all the kernels, freeze all the kernels, and just have frozen corn for
years. So I did that 1 year.
Yeah.
I did that 1 year, and that worked out really well. The other thing that I thought to make quick use of the corn, like if I wanted to use 5 in one dish, 5 to 7 in a dish, cut them all off, right? Roast them in a pan, maybe throw some butter in, whatever spices I want. Sure. And then this to me is the killer, is you make, I don't know what a succotash is, but emotionally this is what a succotash feels like to me, is you chop some tomatoes up, which good use of tomatoes. I've got a bunch of onions in storage still. I got some garlic. And then you just do like a bit of a stir fry with a bunch of spices and butter. And there you go. And you serve that in like a little serving bowl next to your main
but you're eating that first.
Oh, you're eating that first, 100%.
You're getting it quick.
100%.
Yeah.
And you know what's not going in there? Carrots, dude.
No carrots?
No. Those hot carrots, those microwave hot carrots from the 90s.
Oh.
You know what I'm talking about? Like, you know those little frozen bags?
Yeah. Where it's like
freezer
a
bags?
little mix of things.
And those little cubes of carrot. Most disgusting thing on earth. I never want to eat those in the rest of my life. So that's my plan for the corn.
Peppers, I am going to follow you a little bit.
Are you?
I'm going to do a string up.
Oh, you are this year.
I'm going to
Okay.
hang some peppers. The other night, I had some red jalapenos, so I actually smoked them until they were full dry and turned them into chipotle.
Nice.
So they're fully dry, they're fully smoky. Rehydrate them, make like a little adobo sauce. So it's a little flavorful, fresh from the garden. But I want to do some paprika.
Here's what I learned. So the tip for you is the smaller the pepper, the more you can get away with just stringing it easy and not worrying about it.
Oh, okay.
Like Thai chilies, you can string up and you have zero worries at all if they'll rot out on
Problem.
you.
Okay.
The bigger the pepper, the more problems you're going to run into. So I ran into this with the ghost chilies, which are not that big, but they're bigger.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of inner cavity. They're more of like a roundish.
There's more like, there's more stuff inside.
Yeah.
Nuts.
And then the Hungarian bells.
Oh,
Those were complete write-off.
Oh, none of them made it.
None of them. And I think the reason why, and someone messaged me, I forgot exactly what they said, but basically what some people will do is they'll cut them in half so that air can access the interior quicker so that they can't rot out. Because if it's fully contained in like a dry, warm area, that moisture is going to sort of stay in there, and that's ripe for developing bacteria, et cetera. So when I did the paprika, right, I could only use like half my crop because the rest of them had white mold on the inside.
I see. Oh, it was on the inside.
It was on the inside.
That's where you found it.
So you cut it open because you're going to like go grind it, right? And you get that spot.
Good thing you cut them open.
Yeah, exactly, right? So I did that, and then I did grind up some of the Thai chilies, but that's like a pretty hot.
Yeah.
But I will say, like, those are still actually hanging in there.
Oh, wow.
Those ones are very satisfying.
Yeah, and we used them, I think, for the Thai cooking when Supani came.
Anyways, yeah, so something I've been thinking about is I talked to you a little bit ago about upping the chef skills.
Oh, yeah.
Because we've talked about on the Epic Homesteading YouTube channel, which is basically my own personal channel, let's call it that, of the story of this place. We've done some cooking episodes, and they've done okay, and some of them haven't done as well. But everyone who watches the cooking episodes seems to love them.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to figure out, like, well, if that's true, why aren't more people watching them, right? So I put it out on my personal Twitter, actually. I was like, hey, look, I like doing this cooking stuff. I'm trying to get healthier. I'm trying to up my skills in the kitchen. I'm not to say, like, I'm unplugged from the garden, but, like, the garden, my skills are a little bit more developed.
Okay.
So it's more of a system. And
it's balanced.
I understand it. And my cooking, I might have 300 freaking corn cobs and I might not know what to do, right? So I need to up my cooking skills. So I put it out on Twitter. I was like, what's wrong with these videos? Like, how come no one wants to watch them? And then everyone's like, well, okay, you made a radish pizza. You made like an ancient grain scone from your own heart. And it's like, it's not relatable. Like, no one's going to want to make that. And I was like, okay, you're right. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I put a call out to San Diego chefs. I said, I want someone to come down. I will pay you. And I want to speed run learning to cook, like, better. I know how to cook, but I want to learn how to cook better. And a couple people reached out, and they're going to come down, and we're going to cook from local ingredients and garden ingredients. But what I asked them, I was like, I want to learn how to cook, not just like how to watch you cook a recipe.
Yeah.
So I need to learn more of the fundamental skills so that when I do get a glut of something, right, I can come and say, like, hey, like, okay, cool. I know what to do with 700 pounds of watermelon or something. So that's going to probably be coming pretty soon on the Epic Homesteading channel, is more actual cooking, like a recipe that someone would actually want to follow, instead of like you and me doing whatever the hell we were doing.
Yeah, because I haven't done that much this year, and I really need to start right now, I guess. I do a lot of short form cooking content, and I always keep it very simple. It's just like whatever I grab from the garden, olive oil, salt, pepper, and some herbs from the garden.
Your stuff that works well is, I think you should lean into more, honestly, is some of your Bulgarian recipes. You did that one shopska salad, which
very simple, but very delicious.
Popular. And then you did eggs in purgatory, right?
Yeah, that one got me a little heat.
Got a little heat on that one, right? Why?
It's because, here's the thing. Whenever I make something...
Hot take.
Yeah, hot take warning. Whenever I make something, I am never claiming ownership. I'm never claiming where it came from. I could say where it was inspired from. But eggs in purgatory is a dish from Italy, and it's tomatoes with Parmesan and eggs cooked in the tomatoes. and everyone's like, this is shashuka, this is shashuka. Like, this is just shashuka without peppers. I'm like, no, shashuka is with peppers. So it's not shashuka without peppers. Yeah. It's a different thing. It's saying tomato sauce is shashuka without peppers. I'm like, they're just not and I got so many comments about that. I was like, I'm not saying it is. I'm not saying they invented eating eggs with tomatoes. I'm not saying that this is the first time anyone's ever shown you this in the world. So whenever we're making something, honestly, I could be feeling something all the time, not realize it, because so many recipes are so simple.
Yeah.
That they might have a name.
Tomatoes are not even endemic to Europe.
No.
So if we're going to go to that level, think about the botanical history of these plants. Yeah. Tomatoes are not even endemic to Europe itself. No. So any recipe from there is copying something else, you know?
I think it's just like a silly thing, but it's just about being simple, enjoying your garden, connecting to your garden. Because like when you cook out of the garden, you're more aware of what's in there, what's on the way. What do I have to make for dinner tonight because I have so much corn? Yeah. And it just forces you to actually interact with your garden a lot more. Yeah. In a way that's really great.
I think the hardest part for most people that are beginners in both, right? Which is where I was. Yeah. Is you're learning one skill set, gardening, which is, I would say it's pretty intimidating sometimes to learn how to garden. Yeah. It depends on the way you approach it, but it can be intimidating.
Absolutely.
And then you need to learn how to cook. But most of the time, people who just cook are cooking from grocery stores.
Yes.
So they're cooking vegetables and fruits and et cetera that have already been prepared down to their like saleable point. So like an onion that doesn't have the roots and doesn't have the top and is already cured.
Yeah.
Right? Or like, I don't know, like a pepper that's in a bag and a garlic that's already been cloved out, right? So there's a little bit of the prep that I think gets a little intimidating. And then it's like what you said, what's on the way.
Yeah.
Right? So as you gain experience in the garden, you start to understand, okay, well, like in my head, this is how it feels, at least to me. I think about dinner and in my head, almost like a super system above goes, well, you have 300 corn.
Yeah.
You have 4 gallons worth of tomatoes. You have 7 billion pepper. So it probably is going to have one of those 3, you know? So that's the way I think about it. Or sometimes I'll go in the pantry. Yeah. I'll go, well, you harvested the potatoes 3 weeks ago. You haven't used too many of them. So maybe you should make some potatoes. That's what I did this weekend. I was like, you know what? My potatoes that I harvested are starting to chit, which you can definitely still eat those.
Yeah, it's totally fine.
You just have to cut the chit out. Yeah. And so I was like, cool, I'll take like 7 and I'll do a roast potato.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
I had roast potatoes for breakfast.
You know, it's been a struggle. So for me, I love potatoes. Yeah. And I know you love potatoes.
Oh, yeah, I do.
I found how to make roast potatoes finally that are actually crispy. Guaranteed every time. Guaranteed.
What's like the thing that unlocked it?
Baking soda.
Baking soda.
Yeah. So this is not my recipe. Yeah. This is from J. Kenji Lopez-Alt, who we're both big fans of. So shout out to you. If you want to come on the podcast,
hey,
come on.
Happy to.
We will have you on the podcast. Anyways, here's what he did. I think it was for Serious Eats when he worked there.
Yeah.
What he did is he took the 3 major types of potatoes, so red, yellow, white.
Okay.
Waxy and starchy, right?
He's always testing every variable.
He's testing. Then he tested alkalinity in the water. Yeah. So he tested size of chop of potato, so like how big the chunks are, and then also alkalinity of the water. So what he did is he did an acidic mix of water, boiled the potatoes, normal and neutral, pH neutral, and then he did an acid or an alkaline mix, which would be adding baking soda, right? Yeah. And what he found is that adding the baking soda roughed the edges of the potatoes up more. And what of the chunks of potatoes. So you boil the potatoes, you chunk them. Then what does that do? More surface area that's looser on the outside of each chunk. So this was the killer though. He goes, you do that first, you sieve that off, you shake it up, and it actually roughs it up a little more.
The little shake.
Then you do 1/3 cup olive oil. You bloom some like garlic and rosemary in. You don't burn it, you just like saute it. But then you sieve that out. So just the infused olive oil goes into the boiled potatoes. You shake that, you put salt and pepper. Oh, this is important. You put salt and pepper, specifically the salt in at that point. Why? Because it actually dissolves into the starch.
The moisture.
It dissolves into the potato.
Okay.
If you salt it after the fact, it bounces off because it's already crispy, right?
Yeah, you have to salt during the whole process.
So you do the oil, infused oil and the salt, right? Shake it around. That mushes the edges up even more. Now, I did something, I think it's a little, I don't know that he said this. You use one of those pans, but you put a pan liner in like you'd cool bread on so that you don't have to turn the potatoes. because they're cooking up. They're cooking 360.
Yeah.
So you don't have to turn them.
You like air fried it.
Yeah. So as long as they're separated, then you roast them for like 40 minutes, and they are perfectly crunchy every single time. And then you add the garlic and olive oil back in, and because it'll burn if you do it the other way. You're cooking it for too long.
That sounds great.
It works really well.
And I think the other thing, like, I'm definitely going to do that because I mess around with it every time they come out good. Yeah, not going to lie. I've never done that specific recipe, so I'll definitely try it. But I think one of the things that is also intimidating about the gardening and cooking aspect, I was thinking about it, is that when you're cooking, let's say you want to make the meals for the week, you're looking up recipes, you have a list of ingredients, you go to the store and you get those. When you're gardening, it's the ingredients come first, not the recipe. You're not searching for recipe. The ingredients just arrive, and you have to figure out what to do with it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
There's a flipped mentality there where you have to start backwards from how you're used to, and that's very intimidating because it's like everyone knows that you cook with tomatoes. Like, we all know that, but
But what do you make?
Yeah, but what do you make?
Yeah.
So it's like you have to then say, like, what I do, just in case you guys ever run into this, is let's say you have corn, just look up like corn entree, corn side dish, corn recipe. Like, just look up as many different things as you can and find something that's jumping out at you and just make that. And it might become a real favorite and go into your rotation.
Yeah.
But you don't have to look for a specific recipe like chicken a la king or something. I don't know why I thought of that. Never even made it. But search for the ingredients and then a recipe, and you'll probably find something that stands out and is very simple that you could just make.
It's also forward in that ingredient, so it tends to use more of it if you have a lot.
Exactly.
Because I did that with the corn, right? Yeah. And I found, sweet corn cooked in a pan, sweet corn buttered up and salted, right? And then it got into more ethnic preparations. Like, you could do like sort of like a Southeast Asian with like ginger and this and that in the corn, or you could add like garam masala and this and that, and you got an Indian style corn, right? Or you could do elote style corn, but it's all the same base, which would be taking a bunch of corn, cutting the kernels off and sauteing them in a pan with something, and you could get through, have a party, have 4 people over, you could get through 20 ears of corn that way.
I actually did the same thing with tomatoes, which is a classic thing that everyone has a lot of, is I like the tomato egg recipes. Eggs in purgatory, shashuka. There's a Chinese version where you cook the eggs in like a little ginger, garlic, soy sauce, rice wine, and then you add that to the eggs, and that's really good. But they're all just functionally the same thing, seasoned differently. Yeah. And it makes it more fun and interesting, and everyone could do that at home.
Yeah. So that's some of the stuff I've been working on. I do have to figure out with peppers though. I'm looking at it right now. It's intimidating.
There's a lot behind me.
There's probably 500 peppers maybe in that little patch there. So what's nice though is per pepper even I'm starting to develop use cases. Like shishito, I know.
Oh, you're snacking.
I'll throw them on the Blackstone. I'll throw them on the griddle, and I just do a little avocado oil, and then I saute them, I blacken them, and I put them in a bowl, and I maybe have like a creamy mayo, or I do like just salt and pepper or something like that. And so I know I can clean out. If I had a couple people over, I could clean a whole shishito plant out, no problem. So you do start to develop some of these techniques, but it can definitely be overwhelming. But we're going to do more cooking episodes on Homestead, and we actually, curious what you guys think. You'll get a first taste of it here. We're thinking about a format called What to Do with Too Many Blank. What to do with too many tomatoes. You grew too many tomatoes, now what, right? So we're going to mess around with that on Epic Gardening. We'll see if you guys like it, but for now, let's get out of the sun. Let's stay hydrated. Thanks to Element for sponsoring this week's episode.
Watermelon salt's quite good.
Stay salty, my friends. Good luck in the garden, and keep on growing.